I'm just having fun. How's it going, everybody? Welcome. I am Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Thank you for joining me on this fine morning for a little discussion. This is not so much a lesson, so I just want to throw that out there. I think it's very, very valuable. I think it's very useful, but I'm not going to show you how to play anything. Nothing specific anyway. And this has to do with a question from somebody that I have been talking to a little bit on the Blues Guitar Unleashed member forum. And, as always, if you own any of my courses or you're a member of the All Access Pass or anything like that, you have access to the member forum. We have lots of discussions there on a variety of topics. So I encourage you to check it out. If you want to get on the email list, gobgu.com/thelist. If you missed the last one, gobgu.com/allaccess to learn more about the All Access program. All the usual stuff. I'm going to quit flashing things up on the screen. I'll put them in a link below this video somehow. But I got some folks on. I've killed enough time. So here's the question, and I think this is a really common thing, and it's. Well, I'm just going to read you the question. He says, as I'm listening to the different chord sounds going by in a chord progression with any style of music, I think it's important. I understand that certain scales will fit better than others, but it's how to use those scales as you're listening to the different chord changes that I don't understand. And he goes on from there to talk about, do I do this? Do I do this? And I get it. There's a whole lot of confusion because this is... Man, I mean, improvising is a very personal thing. I truly equate improvising to talking. This is like trying to teach somebody how to talk, right? It can be a very, very challenging thing. And, I make this equation a lot where I say, a little baby will learn how to make a sound, okay? Da-da. That little baby doesn't know what da-da means. They just figure out how to make that sound. Much like on a guitar, we figure out, here's how I make a pentatonic sound. Okay? We figure out how to make a sound, or we are taught how to make a sound. But what happens is that little baby says da-da, and then daddy, who happens to be in the room, is like, oh my gosh, he said my name, and freaks out, right? So that's positive reinforcement for the baby to go, oh, when I say dada, that person who I know and like and trust is very happy, right? And then mom comes, here's the commotion, right? Walks down the hall and comes in, and the baby says, dada. And she says, no, I'm not daddy, I'm mama, but that's so cute. And the baby realizes, hey, that's a different reaction that I got. And then the brother hears the commotion and walks into the room, and what's the baby say? Dada again, to see what is going to happen, okay? That is experience. Experience is always your best teacher, okay? And I really have to make that clear. As much as I love my job and as much as I love teaching people, experience is always the best teacher. My job as a facilitator is to lead you down a path that's going to get you the best, most useful, most experience in the shortest amount of time. Okay, that's what I'm here for, not to force feed you gobs and gobs and gobs of information. Okay, there's a difference there, and I think it's important to be aware of it. So, hope you may hear some gardening apparently going on near my home. The next door neighbors, sounds like it must be lawn day for them. Anyhow, hopefully you can still hear me okay, because I really thought they were done. The important thing to realize is that experimentation is going to be very, very important, because just like that baby has to try out this new sound in a lot of different environments to see what the result is going to be, you are going to have to do the same thing every time you learn a new sound. You're going to, which for you is going to be a new scale. You're going to have to try it out. You're going to have to see if it works, okay? So let me kind of show you an example here let's say that, and I'm just going to break out the old looper here. I've got a little looper at my feet. Somebody on one of my last sessions said I had the most talented feet in the business because I have all these pedals down here that do all these different things. So I appreciate that. Let's say that I'm just playing something very simple, okay? Not a blues. Okay, so because blues is a little bit unique. It's one of the reasons we specialize in blues. It is different. Okay, but let's say you're doing something rather simple. G, C, G, D. Okay, so it's a very simple chord progression. You have different approaches to that. And you may or may not like the sound. So for example, one of his things was, is the lead guitarist thinking of playing root notes first with each chord change? Maybe that's an option, okay? If the song goes through the different chords, do you change a scale with every chord? Maybe. You have to decide, okay? So there's no right or wrong answer to this. What you have to do is you have to become familiar with as many approaches as possible, okay? If I take a simple chord progression like that, there's no notes that are out of key. This is all in the key of G major, so I can just play a G major scale. Get over that. Right? Okay, but obviously that's gonna get a little dull, but it works. You can do it, right? None of the notes are gonna be wrong. They're just choices, right? Do you like the sound of this note over this chord? I can't decide that for you. That's something that you would have to decide. Okay, so you have to experiment and you have to decide what are the sounds that you like to hear. Okay, taking that same thing, I could do something very different. You might not know what that is, but what I'm doing is I'm playing a different pentatonic scale for each chord. So for the G, when the G major chord goes on, I'm playing the G major pentatonic scale. When the D major chord is going on, I played the D major pentatonic scale. When the C major chord is going on, I played the C major pentatonic scale. Do you like that better? I don't know. Maybe you do and maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. They both work, right? I can just play that G major scale. And I can play it all day. Right? Or I can change my pentatonic scale. Okay? Or I could do a little of both. Maybe there are times when you want to play the scale right? So you want to play fast. Okay, and so maybe the scale affords you that option. But then you want to get something that sounds a little different, so you start switching over to arpeggios, or you start switching over to major or minor pentatonic sounds, based on the chord. Again, these are all different options, and they all mix and match. There's no one that works. They all work. They all serve a different purpose. They will all sound different to you. So to try to come up with every possible approach. Facebook. How y'all doing on the Google? Well, maybe it's something. I think it picked it back up. Hey, cool. Anyhow, so there's all these different options. Tons and tons and tons of different options. So there's no right or wrong answer here. And if I were to try and list every possible approach that you could take, I wouldn't get there. There's always stuff that comes up, you know, and that's part of the learning process. You know, I'd been playing guitar for 20 years before I realized that I can, for example, over a G major chord, I could play a D major pentatonic scale. I never thought to do that, but it works. I mean, I like the sound of it. You might not like the sound of it, but I like it, used sparingly, right? There's always more sounds out there and more ideas. And the only thing you can do is try them. Choose one and try it and see if you like the sound of it. And if you do, you file that away in that backpack, that bag of tricks that you carry with you everywhere. You know that over this type of a chord progression, this approach works because you tried it and you liked it. So you file that away as good, right? Or maybe you tried a different approach and one of two things happened. Maybe you try the changing pentatonics for every chord. And maybe what you discovered is that you didn't love the sound of it. Or maybe what you discovered is that you can't quite do it, okay? But you got glimpses of, hey, I really like that sound. Well, then that's even better, because now not only do you know that here's something that you probably are going to really dig and that you're going to want to do more of, but it tells you exactly what you should be practicing on, because it's something that you can't do, or at least not to your satisfaction, right? So there's a whole lot of great things in there, right? You're learning a lot. Again, you're gaining experience just by trying this stuff out. Okay. Let me just check up. All the comments and stuff roll off of these. Yes, I do like these live things. These are super fun because I can just rant. We make the joke that I'm like a wind-up. You know, ask me a question and put me on a stage, and I'll just talk. So that's kind of me. As I like to say, I get paid to talk for a living. So anyhow, that's you know, I'll say a standard type of chord progression that stays in one key. Okay. What about blues? Obviously, this is Blues Guitar Unleashed, right? So blues is different. Blues has a different set of chord changes. We have like a G blues. Ooh, we have an out of tune guitar. Actually, let's handle that first. Somehow I must have done something. Interesting. Excuse me. I tune because I care. Yeah, I don't know. That was kind of weird. I must have bent that G string out. Okay. So let's say I'm doing a blues. Nothing fancy, just a blues in G. I'm just putting it into the looper. Okay, so there I've got it in the looper. So what are my approaches? What are my options? All right, simplest approach, the blues scale or the minor pentatonic scale. There's nothing fancy about that. I'm just playing notes from the 5 boxes of the minor pentatonic scale. I can play it over all of the chords, and I'm done. That's it. That is an approach. It's probably, I'll say, the least sophisticated approach in that it's not changing scales, it's not changing modalities or modes or anything like that. It's fairly straightforward. So that's a great way to get started. Not only is it a great way to get started, it's a great place to end. It sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. So one of the best things about playing blues is that the simplest approach is used 80 to 90% of the time. You know, if you listen to Albert King, to Stevie Ray Vaughan, to Johnny Winter, to Jimi Hendrix, 80 to 90% of everything you hear, Billy Gibbons, you know, the list goes on and on, Eric Clapton, right? The list goes on and on and on and on. 80% of it is going to be the minor pentatonic or minor blues sound, period. So at that point, it simply becomes a matter of, okay, well, what do I play from that sound? Okay, and now you're talking about what I call vocabulary. You know a sound, like a baby learns dada, okay, but a baby has to learn how to say, you know, daddy, I want some milk, or daddy, you know, I'm hungry, or mama, I'm hungry, right? That's a phrase. Okay, that's getting a message across. I think we can all agree that there's a big difference between this and, okay, same scale, same group of notes, but I said something very different with the second example. When I play a lick or a phrase, I'm saying something. Okay, I want you to think of that as a sentence, okay, or a phrase. You're getting a point across. And just like you would do if you were standing up in front of a room full of people talking to them, you would play one phrase, or you would say one phrase after another, after another, after another. And you might plan out what you were going to say. I think most people would plan out what they were going to say before they got on the stage. Okay? So I think it's important to plan out what you think you might play. Now, I say what you think you might play because, as Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's very true that the first time you get up with a band and try to take a solo, the best laid plans, and those of you who have been through this and are currently on this session, please chime in and let everybody else know exactly what happens your first few times up. You start with the best of intentions that you're going to play that solo that you learned note for note, and when you make a mistake on the third lick, all of that goes away, and all of a sudden you're back to having to improvise. So that's why it is important to do both. It's important to, yes, learn solos in their entirety, note for note, because that's going to make a great way. Just like my first grader, or my youngest son, when he was in like the first grade, all my kids when they were in the first and second grade, they used to have to learn these little poems and speeches and things, right? I mean, why do they teach the Gettysburg Address? I don't think it's because of the content. I think it's because it teaches how to speak, right? That's what we want. We want, as kids grow up, they have to learn, they have to model how to speak. So they learn famous things that were said, okay? You do the same thing. If you learn, a B.B. King solo from The Thrill Is Gone, you're learning how solos work, right? When you learn a solo, I have this package called 5 Easy Blues Solos. As you learn those solos, you're learning how solos go together. Okay, and I've made them easy. In Blues Guitar Unleashed, there's 6 solos. I think I've never even tried to add up all the different solos that I've created and written and published for this purpose, but it's got to be 100 or more by now. There's tons of them out there. Okay, and of course you can learn solos off of records, but that's how we move towards that goal. When you combine that with your knowledge. Okay, your knowledge of approaches and your experience, knowing that, okay, it could be that it's all pentatonic, minor pentatonic. It could be a different approach where it's mostly minor pentatonic, but then it goes to the major pentatonic over the 1 chord. but then okay, so in something like that, I'm playing the minor pentatonic over the 4 and the 5 chord. I'm adding in some of the major pentatonic over the 1 chord. Slightly more sophisticated, different approach. But if you weren't aware of that, and you went and say you transcribed a B.B. King solo where he used that, you would wonder why. Why did he play those notes? How can he get away with that? I have nothing to call that. Okay, so that's why you do both, right? And the reason that you learn licks is because when things fall apart, you're going to still have you still need to have something to say. Just as when you give a speech, you might, you read the room. You might say something and you can tell that there's puzzled looks on people's faces, right? So you change what you're going to say. You say something different. You repeat yourself, right? All these different things that you do when you talk, you also do when you solo. All right? Wow, greetings from Germany. Hey, how you doing, Steve? Very cool, very cool. Hopefully this is kind of all making sense. Like I said, I know this is a little bit woo-woo, and I know that this is not like, here's how to play a lick. So this is something where you're going to have to sit down and kind of think about this. But this is the sort of stuff that will set you up for years, right? If you think about the structure of how you are learning, okay? One of the great things about, YouTube and Facebook and Vimeo and all these different sites where there's all this content and all these videos that's available is we can do things like this. We can share, we can discuss, we can talk about things. You can get a lot of information. The downside of it is that it's drinking from a fire hose, as we all know, and there isn't a structure to it. And so the hardest part is, and then there's always the kind of side thing, which is some of it's just very inaccurate. And you have to sort of weigh what your experience is against, what you see. And you might watch one of my videos and think, that guy's totally full of it. And I get that. Not everybody thinks the way I do. And I'm the first person to admit that I am not the perfect teacher for everyone, because my approach is different and it's a little bit unique. And therefore, if you like it, it's probably great for you. But if you don't like it, it's really lousy. I've had teachers I didn't connect with over the years. They were fantastic players. They were fantastic teachers, just didn't connect with me. So I didn't learn anything, right? Other people I knew took lessons from them and made great strides. So wonderful, yay. I don't believe there's one, for everyone. That's what's great. We have all these different options. The best thing about YouTube is you can go sample all the different options. But I do believe that at some point you need to pick one and you need to go that way and you do need to focus. That's just my opinion, but for what it's worth. So anyhow, I think I've probably answered most of these questions. Like I say, he asked me, should I do something every time the chord changes? Again, that would be one approach. That's one option. You can change your scale every time the chord changes. Even in a blues, I can do that. I can do... I'm treating every new chord as a whole new key. And I can just, that's just... Turnarounds are great places to just take a lick that, and put them in there, right? So in all of those situations, I'm using a different approach. So I'm going to get a different sound. That's the bottom line, right? Sometimes two approaches can conceivably give you the same sound. For example, I can combine the major and the minor blues scale. and I get a lot of notes. Okay, I can also take a Mixolydian mode, add in the blue notes, the flatted third and the flat fifth, and I get the exact same set of notes. And if that's over your head, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. The point is, I got to the exact same group of notes 2 different ways. Okay, so which way is best? The one that works for you, the one that you understand, the one that you can see when you look down to play it. That's the one that works the best. So I tend to explain everything as many ways as possible so you can just grab the one that works. Okay, don't feel like you have to understand them all. You just have to understand the ones that make sense to you. Yeah, brain freeze and sausage fingers the first time or two. Absolutely. Deer in the headlights. Yep, and it definitely happens. Okay, so is the A minor pentatonic what you stay on when you move to the D minor and E minor in the progression, or do you try to play a D minor scale and then an E minor scale? So that's a perfect question. Yes. Take your pick. You can do either. Okay, if I have, you know, if I have an A minor blues, right, an A minor, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just putting it here in my looper. So I could play A minor, and I'm not changing. Still not changing. Now I'm going to change. Here's D minor. Here's A minor. Here's E minor. D minor. A minor. Okay, so as you can see, both are correct. You have 2 options. So that's what I'm talking about. There's always a different approach and always a different option. So hopefully this gives you some food for thought today. That's all I'm trying to do, is just sort of get you in the right headspace so that when you're looking at something, you can think, well, I should try this out because maybe it might work. Maybe I might like it. That's all that you can really do at the end of the day. Okay, so thanks for joining me. I've taken up far too much of your time already, but I appreciate you being here and sharing some time with me, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.